Hey, good to have you here. My name is Achil Prabhat Rudolph. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a social confidence coach. And in this video, I'll talk about why Indian men are often perceived as creepy, especially when they come to the West and enter the world of dating and mating. And I'll also tell you how you can resolve this once and for all. This is a very serious problem. For Indians abroad, this is often a complete dead end because online dating often doesn't work for them for various reasons. And then when they're considered as creeps, when they go out and meet people in the real world, well, then there's no other option left for them than to just wait. And sometimes they do get lucky and meet someone through their friend circles, but most of them don't. And then they're really forced to get an arranged marriage when they turn 30 or 35. Now, to get out of that equilibrium, it requires a lot of action. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. In this video, I'll try to wake you up a little bit to the extent of work that is necessary for you to get out. So it's going to be a bit of a longer video, and sometimes I will potentially cross the line and even offend you a little bit. I think that's necessary for you to wake up and realize that there is work to do. Now, let's talk about why it is that Indian men are often considered or perceived as creepy. And an example that made me really think about this was a reel that I posted recently on Instagram. I'm gonna put it over here. And in that video, all that really happens is an Indian man goes up to a couple of German women and he talks to one of them and says hello, and he makes a compliment and he asks her for her name. And that's really all that happens. This reel at this point has around 1 million views. And if you look at the comments, I'll put the link in the description, it's just absolutely horrendous. It's disgusting. People are throwing racist slurs at this guy, saying that he should be deported, all kinds of suicidal black pill, nasty, very sad and depressing, self-deprecating comments. What did he do wrong? Why? He's just saying hello, right? And when you look at that video, you will notice that he's extremely polite. He's extremely nice. And ironically, that is the problem. Indian men are perceived as creepy because they're trying extremely hard to not be perceived as creepy. And this is a tendency that's specifically strong for Indian immigrants because they really want to be perceived as responsible, careful, polite, safe, and nice people. And they have a lot of fear of getting into trouble. They don't want to be deported. They don't want to be kicked out of the country again. It's understandable if you're a guest here and your visa status is not yet final. Also understandable coming from India, where violence against women is a bigger topic. And when they come here, often they also have this feeling that they represent their whole nation. And in Indian society, it's definitely considered weird and obnoxious to even talk to a woman that you don't know, that you're interested in. And so they think that is the last thing they should do over here when they represent their country in a different society. And so instead of going out there and interacting with women and learning that soft skill, they often go on Reddit and spend hours looking at the comments of people who have experienced this and talk about how horrible the situation was when someone approached them. You'll see all kinds of toxic content online, like the comments in my reel. And of course, those are mainly people who are venting. Mainly people who experience something negative will go on Reddit and write how badly the approach went. When you just get approached and there's a lovely little smile and a little bit of banter, you're not going to go on Reddit. And so they end up in these kind of echo bubbles, echo chambers, and become more creepy as a result. Because of course they're even more afraid of doing all these things that people talk about online. And all of that fear really comes through when you start talking to someone. And when you have all of that fear, you're constantly censoring yourself, constantly double guessing and trying to be extra polite. And that really shows that you're not okay with just letting it flow. You're not okay with just saying what's on your mind. And when you're like holding yourself back like that, building this barrier, of course it makes you nervous because it takes energy. And it also makes you boring because no one likes to interact with barriers. You want to interact with the real you, what's inside. But you're not letting that come out. Right? That is the opposite of authentic and vulnerable communication. Because you're scared of letting the real thing out, because you're scared that if you were to just speak your mind honestly, then they would maybe think you're a creep. Because your honest self might actually be creepy, might actually say something wrong, might actually be hurtful or violent. Well, if you have that fear and you build this barrier to make sure that nothing of that bad stuff comes out, people are going to think that there is bad stuff inside. It really lowers the trust. You're scaring people because you show that you have something to hide. If you don't want to be perceived as creepy, then you mustn't be afraid of being creepy. Okay, if you're just right now asking yourself, maybe it could be creepy if I go up to someone and talk to them, well, then you're going to be creepy. But now, how do you change that? How do you assure yourself that on the inside there is nothing creepy? If you just open the floodgates, it's gonna be okay. You're not gonna be a creep. Well, to understand that, we need to really understand what creepiness is even better. People interact with each other all the time without it being creepy, right? They meet and they usually exchange some sort of value. You go to the storekeeper and you buy a coffee. Or I'm talking to you right now, and I hope that's not creepy. You're choosing to watch this video, and I'm transmitting some information and some energy to you. But there is one way to make interactions creepy, and really that's the only thing that makes interactions creepy. And that is when there is a fear on one side, at least one side of the interaction, that the interaction, the exchange, will be forced against the will of that side with violence, by breaking agreed upon usually implicit social rules. For example, if I was to say, hey, you have to listen to this video, you have to finish this video, and then you don't, you just click away because you say I have something else to do, and then I come into your home and I break through the window and I say, listen to me, you have to listen to this is important, man. Well, you'll consider that extremely creepy. And there's one common way that this fear gets evoked, because usually people don't break into each other's home. I'm not going to do that. But there's a much more common way that this fear is usually invoked, and that's when there is an exchange proposed, but one side of the exchange offers extremely low value. And it's very clear that the value that one side is offering is just not commensurate with the value that the other side is offering. Because that kind of exchange will never happen voluntarily. So it triggers the fear that the person with a lower value will force the exchange. And that is usually done by violence or breaking the social rules. And so to prevent creepiness, you have to do two things. You have to first understand exactly the rules that we're talking about here. This is not just the law. There's more rules in social life in different cultures. And then second, to prevent the most common form of fear of breaking the rules, you have to extremely, relentlessly build your value. Let's talk about these two things one by one. First of all, in the West, we have a culture where contact between men and women is required. There needs to be direct conversations. There's no families taking care of marriages here anymore. And there have evolved rules for how that can happen, for how men and women can interact with each other. And you need to understand those rules. You need to understand how that can work, not just in online dating where the rules are kind of enforced by a company, but also in the real world. There are also rules for how to meet someone at a party, in a club, in a cafe. But it's not enough to just study the rules. To really understand the rules of this complex game, you need to play the game as well. You need to go out there and you need to get an intuitive feel for those rules. And unfortunately, there is no way around doing that, around going out into the real world and then risking to break the rules every now and then, because when you're new to this game, you won't understand the rules in all its subtlety, and so you will be considered creepy. For some interactions, that'll be inevitable. There are test environments where you can practice. You can practice with your friends. You can practice with a coach like me. But in the end, you need to go out and learn it in the real world. And that's, of course, extremely difficult because you're going to be afraid of breaking the rules. That, as we said earlier, is the definition of being creepy. But if you're not socialized here in this culture, you have learned different set of rules and you need to come over here and enter the world and really interact with it to learn the full complexity of those rules over here. And of course, it's going to feel a bit unfair because you'll say, hey, locals have it easier. They learned those rules as they grew up and they were allowed to make all kinds of mistakes when they're adolescents. They're still allowed to make all kinds of mistakes now. Whereas as an immigrant, you can't afford to make a lot of big mistakes. You're afraid of the consequences of that. And yes, they are more severe than for locals. But the solution to this is not to withdraw and stop competing. The solution is to study the rules and understand them and feel them even better than the locals. And that also includes understanding the penalties, because every set of rules includes penalties for breaking the rules. And that is part of the game. You can't learn a game without ever breaking the rules. And every game will know this. You can't even play a game without ever breaking the rules. And that's also built into every game. If you're not allowed to ever foul in a game of football or cricket, you're not going to be able to ever win. You need to learn that this is also the case here in this area of social skills and dating. It's okay to break the rules sometimes unintentionally to a certain extent, and there are penalties for that. And you need to understand those penalties. It's okay if you go on a date with someone and it all goes well, but then you escalate and you take her hand a little bit too early. Or you see someone at a bar and they give you eye contact and you think it's okay now to go over there, but then she says, no, I didn't look at you. Well, it's okay. You can fumble an approach. You can go up to someone and just run out of things to say or say one wrong word. It's a mistake. Sometimes you'll break the rules. There are penalties for that. But that stuff is not going to get you deported. I went to a club the other day. Sometimes I do these boot camps with my clients, and we were in Amsterdam. We went to a club, and one of my clients had a really good conversation with a woman. He just met her on a dance floor, and they were like dancing, laughing around. But then this other guy, another white guy, comes in from behind, and he kind of stands between my Indian client and this Dutch girl. And he says to my client, "Hey man, I'm actually talking to her. We met earlier, and we're doing drugs together." And in that moment, he also gives a little pill to the girl and puts it into her hand. So this guy had just gone away to procure these substances, and he had come back and was trying to get rid of my client. And my client was overwhelmed. He was paralyzed. He didn't know what to do. He thought, oh, damn, I mean, he's a white guy, she's a white girl. These white guys always stealing my girls. He got overwhelmed with all this emotion and just didn't know what to do. And so the white guy, just took the Dutch girl and led her away, took her by the hand. Now, in this situation, my client could have understood that he can actually persist. If he had known the rules of social life in a club, he would know that it's okay to just say, hey, wait a second. No, I'm talking to her right now. And you just met her a few minutes earlier. That does not give you the right of just leading her off. And you having drugs also doesn't give you the right. He could have offered his own hand to the girl and said, hey, do you want to take drugs with this guy, or do you want to talk to me? It's going great for me. Let's continue. Maybe she would have preferred talking to him. Maybe she would have preferred talking to the other guy. Maybe she would have felt offended. Maybe there would have been a bit of a conflict. Maybe there would have been a bit of even physical violence in that moment. Yeah. These kinds of breaches will happen, especially in a club where people play dirty. You cannot play in that kind of environment when you have this fear of committing a foul. Now let's talk about the second aspect of how to prevent creepiness, and that's building your value relentlessly. This is a very common reason for creepiness. You come to the exchange and one side has much lower value than the other side to offer. And when that's the case, then immediately the side with the higher offer is a little bit fearful, especially if it's a intergender situation where women are often physically inferior. So when one side comes, when the man's side comes with very low value to offer, and he makes it clear that he wants to exchange with the woman, then the woman will immediately be scared that the man will take what he wants by force and without a fair exchange. If you have a lot of value to offer, and if it's absolutely obvious, then it will never be creepy, because no one will ever be scared that you're going to take anything by violence. Why would you? People are happy to exchange value with you because you have so much to give. Now, this doesn't mean you can just sit at home and just build your value and just become this extreme billionaire, extremely shredded guy, and then everything will just happen on its own. You still have to make the first step. That is part of the rules. The social rules mandate that men make that first real step and actually make themselves vulnerable in the way we've discussed. But a lot of guys, they just learn those rules and they learn them really well, but then they go into the interaction, they say hello, but it's clear that they don't have a lot of value to offer. And it's because they have that belief in their own head. They still carry that with them. Why would she date me? I'm just a brown guy. I don't really have a great life. That's a problem, because value doesn't even exist objectively. It's only a subjective perception, differs from one person to the other. And even if you think that you're really valuable, the other person might not agree. I think this video is pretty dope, but many of you didn't agree and they just trolled off somewhere else. But if I wasn't believing right now that this video is actually valuable, then I can guarantee you that 99% of you would have already left. When you don't believe in your own value, others are not going to believe in it either. And so that will immediately be perceived as creepy when you're standing there, because you're physically in front of someone. So it's not that easy to just click away. Now, this can be alleviated by showing that you know the rules extremely well. And if you show that you're extremely polite and would never ever cross a boundary, then you're not going to be considered as creepy. You're just going to get rejected. But of course, it's better if you actually have extremely high self-worth. And that's going to make it more likely that the other person will also see your value and not be considering you as creepy. Now, as uncomfortable as it might seem, most of the time, this low self-esteem and self-worth actually comes from people knowing on a deeper level that they are not really happy with their lives. They might say, no, actually, I'm really happy. I have a good career. Everything is good. It's just the skin color. It's just the skin color. I have a feeling that people don't like me because of my skin color. Now, that is usually complete bullshit. You know that. You know that people don't really care about one particular physical attribute. They definitely don't care about this one attribute of skin color so much that it would override all the other criterion. It's one element, it's one factor. For most people, it's not an important factor. But no one says that only if someone is not brown, I can date them. No one says if someone is brown, I cannot date them, no matter what else. Human valuations are so much more multifaceted than that. And the reason you're thinking this is really a certain kind of laziness, because that's one thing that you cannot change. And so if your mind can blame your state on the one thing that you just can't change, it also doesn't have to do a lot of work. It would be in vain. And so that is a real problem. Your skin color doesn't matter that much, but this tendency of yours to blame an external factor, that is a problem. That is a real bad sign that makes you unattractive, because that shows that you have low potential in life. You're not going to achieve much, that you have certain mental health problems, and that you have really bad outcomes waiting for you in life. You have to resolve that. You have to work through that. You might still say, no, I'm really working on myself. I'm extremely great. I have a great career. I make good money. I go to the gym. I look good. I'm such a high value man. That's not a problem for me. The build value thing, that's not what I have to do. Well, if you do all these things, but you still have low self-esteem and you kind of suck as a communicator, then it really doesn't matter how much you make or how good you look. Because low self-esteem is a deal breaker. Low self-esteem is one of those things where a lot of people will say, just because of that one attribute, I'm not going to date the person. So you cannot say, yeah, everything is great in my life. It's just this social thing, and with the women, it's not working. Everything else is amazing. If you haven't built an exciting social life, then you have not completed the work that you had to do on yourself. Communication skills is an integral part of your personal development. And I know there's a lot of people who say, yeah, just work on your body and work on your career and then it'll happen automatically. That's advice that's not for you. That's nonsense. It might make sense for people who naturally have social skills because maybe they were socialized in the native culture. But if you're coming from a different culture and connecting with people is a weakness, then working on yourself includes building this skill of becoming confident with women and with people in general. And on a deep level, you know this. So when you go into an interaction, part of your mind knows that you're not offering enough value. You know that your life on paper looks great. It's good to your parents back home, but you know that when you talk to this other person, it's actually not enough. You cannot hide this, so it comes through. And you can change that. That's obviously something you need to work on. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. This is going to be work, and it will require aggressive and systematic effort to change. You have to give your best, and then you have a good chance of changing this, but this is going to include more than watching YouTube videos. Once you start taking this thing seriously and really working on it and improving your value in all these areas, not just your body, not just your career, not just a career, but also a career that actually fulfills you. And also in your social life. Then, even if things are not yet where you want them to be, you can go into interactions confidently because you can assure yourself and the other person that you're working on your weaknesses. And then you can project into the future. You can say, okay, right now my social life is not very active. I'm still new here, but I'm working on it very heavily. For example, by talking to you right now, by going out and meeting new people. And I'm absolutely sure that it's going to be amazing. When you're doing the hard work, then you can have that confidence, and then you can make yourself believe and you can make other people believe that your future is amazing. And that's what people really care about. People don't care about where you are right now. They care about what future will look like if they join your life. So in conclusion, if you build your value in a holistic way and you learn the rules of social conduct in the culture that you're in, it's going to be very easy for you to interact and attract high-value social opportunities. You're going to walk around and literally, you're going to just see someone in a street, in a bus, in a bar. You're going to make eye contact, and you will know how to interpret that eye contact. That is like the equivalent of a match on a dating app in the real world. And then you'll go over there and you'll know the rules for how to start the interaction. You know that it's a fair ask. And you know that nothing can go terribly wrong. And even if it does, it's not going to be a complete deal breaker that's going to get you kicked out of the country. It becomes like when you go on a stage and you offer to give a presentation at your company event or at a tech conference. You apply to speak. There's a process for you to submit a proposal. It gets selected. Then you prepare and you give a presentation on stage. There's nothing creepy about this. In the end, people get some information, you get some fame in return. It's a very regular exchange. The rules for dating, especially in the real world, are not as explicit as the rules for submitting a talk at a tech conference, but they exist. And you have to learn them. It's going to take a bit more time and work, but it's possible, and it's totally okay to be a person who needs to learn them. It's not very fair because other people don't have to do that. You have to do that. It's also not fair because there's not going to be a lot of support for this. This is something that institutions haven't really understood fully. So they're not going to really teach you what you need to know to learn these rules. But in a way, you can also be grateful for this unfairness and say, okay, I'm forced to learn something really difficult. But when I learn the rules and I learn how to build my value in all areas of life, more than other people have to do, ultimately that's going to benefit me. That's going to help you. So take it as a motivation that you can be grateful for. And these skills are not just going to help you in dating. Of course, understanding the social reality and building your value is going to help you in all other areas of life. And as I said, even after you do all of this, you're still going to be creepy every now and then. But honestly, isn't it better to be creepy a few times in the beginning than to be creepy for the rest of your life and to have your children turn into creeps as well? The fact that you ended up here with me listening to this for 30 minutes is not a good sign on one side because it means you have this problem. But it's also a very good sign because it means that you have the capacity to learn and to understand about this. It is a difficult problem. It's going to take more time to fully solve it. You're going to have to listen to many more half-an-hour videos, but it shows that you have the capacity to absorb a solution. A lot of people, most people, will only end up looking at that Instagram reel with millions of views because it corresponds to their level of awareness. They have the problem and they feel it and it's painful and they have the opinion that it's just creepy for Indians to go. And so that video connects well. This video here will get very, very little views in comparison, very few views, because it offers a solution. It offers a way out, and most people aren't ready for that. They are kind of addicted to the problem, to the emotions, to the anger. You are different because you've watched this video. You are open to finding a rational way out. And that makes me very confident that I might be able to actually help you with this further. So I put a link in the description where you can schedule a one-on-one call with me or one of my team members where we can discuss ways to help you solve this systematically. Thanks a lot for watching. Samgachadvam. Namaskar.